Imagine your office isn't just, a desk. Imagine it's a charming balcony overlooking the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe a bustling cafe in a really vibrant European city.
Right.
That's not just a daydream anymore. It's actually becoming a real possibility for lots of remote professionals.
It really is.
So today we're doing a deep dive into the Portugal D8 Digital Nomad Visa. It's a specific, structured, and importantly, completely legal way to make that lifestyle happen.
Exactly. A proper pathway.
Yeah, we're using a comprehensive 2025 guide, so you, our listener, are getting the absolute latest, most vital information.
Good stuff.
Seriously, for anyone who's dreamed of working remotely from a place with excellent infrastructure, a great climate, amazing quality of life, Portugal just keeps coming up, doesn't it?
It really does. Consistently ranks high.
So our mission today is just to unpack all the essential details, give you the clarity, the confidence really to understand this opportunity.
And what's fascinating, I think, is how this D visa, the official name, is quite a mouthful. Residence visa for the exercise of professional activity provided remotely.
Right.
It really shows this massive global shift, doesn't it, towards remote work, location independence.
Totally. It's not some clever workaround.
No, exactly. It's Portugal saying, we see this, we recognize the digital nomad economy. And the benefits, as you said, they're pretty substantial.
Like what specifically?
Well, you get full legal residency in Portugal, and crucially, that extends to your family, spouse, partner, dependent kids.
Okay, family inclusion, that's big.
Huge. And it means access to Portuguese healthcare, public services, and that amazing freedom of visa-free travel across the whole Schengen area.
Schengen travel. Always a plus.
Definitely. Plus, there's the potential tax advantage, the non-habitual resident scheme, the NHR. We'll probably dig into that later.
Yeah, we should.
And for people looking long-term, it's a clear path. Permanent residency, even citizenship, after just 5 years.
5 years, wow.
Yeah, and the process itself, actually quite straightforward. Often faster than, say, the golden visa.
Okay, it sounds like a dream for a lot of people listening. But who exactly is this visa for? Is it just anyone with a laptop? Or is Portugal looking for specific kinds of remote workers?
That's a really good distinction to make. It's tailored specifically for people earning their living remotely.
Yeah.
But here's the key. The income has to come from outside Portugal.
Ah, okay. Source of income matters.
Absolutely. So think remote employees working for companies based anywhere but Portugal. Or freelancers, contractors with mostly international clients. Digital entrepreneurs whose businesses operate remotely.
Got it. So location-independent professionals.
Pretty much. If you can do your job using telecommunications from anywhere, you're likely in the target group. The main criteria are non-EU Swiss citizenship, naturally.
Right.
A regular, stable income from that remote work, meeting certain minimum income levels. We'll get to that. Having health insurance that covers you in Portugal. A clean criminal record. And, this is important, having your accommodation in Portugal already arranged.
Accommodation arranged before you apply.
Yes, proof of accommodation is part of the application.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned it's a dedicated pathway, but I've heard there isn't just one D8 visa. Can you clear that up? What are the variations?
You're right. That does cause some confusion sometimes. Basically, the Portugal D8 Digital Nomad Visa comes in 2 main flavors.
Okay.
First, there's the temporary stay visa. This one's valid for a year, allows multiple entries. It sounds good for exploring, right?
Yeah, it sounds flexible.
But, and this is the really critical difference, it doesn't give you the right to apply for a residence permit once you're there.
Ah, okay. So it's more like a long tourist visa for remote workers.
Exactly. Think of it like that. Then you have the residency visa. Now, this is the one that sets you up for a longer stay.
Right.
It's initially valid for 4 months, allows 2 entries, but crucially, it requires you to apply for a proper residence permit once you arrive in Portugal.
So that's the main one for people wanting to actually live there.
Precisely. If you're planning a longer stay, aiming for a residency, maybe citizenship down the line, the residency visa is almost always the one people mean, and it's definitely what we're focusing on today.
Okay, perfect. Let's talk about the elephant in the room for many.
Right.
The financial side. This is where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because the income and savings requirements seem pretty key.
You've hit on a really crucial point. The D8's financial requirements are, well, they're actually among the highest for Portuguese residency visas.
Higher than others? Why is that?
There's a reason. Portugal seems to be signaling quite clearly that they want established professionals, people who are financially self-sufficient, who will contribute locally but won't, strain public resources.
Makes sense. So what's the number? The income requirement?
Okay, so for income, you need to prove you earn at least 4 times the Portuguese minimum monthly wage.
4 times minimum wage.
Yes, so as of 2025, the minimum wage is €870, multiply it by 4, and you get 3,480 per month.
3,482 per month. Okay. Now, here's a question I had. Does that amount change if you bring family? Like, does it go up per person?
That's a fantastic question, and here's a key insight for you. No, it doesn't. That 3,480 per month income requirement applies to the main applicant, regardless of how many family members are included.
Wow. Okay. That's actually quite significant. The income bar is fixed no matter the family
Right.
size.
Exactly.
But what about savings? Is there a savings requirement too? And does that change for families?
Yes, there is a savings requirement, and that part does scale with family members.
Oh, okay. Tell me about that.
So a single applicant needs to show savings equivalent to 12 times the minimum monthly wage. In 2025, that's 10,448.
Okay. 10,448 in savings for one person.
Right, but then for each additional adult family member, like a spouse or partner, you need to add an amount equal to 50% of the minimum wage for each month, so an extra 6 times the minimum wage total.
Right. An extra 5,220 for a spouse.
Correct. And for each dependent child, it's 25% of the minimum wage per month, so an extra 3 times the minimum wage total.
So another 2,610 euros per child. It adds up.
It definitely adds up. So while the ongoing income requirement is fixed, that initial savings buffer you need to show needs careful planning, especially for families.
Yeah, you really need a budget for that initial proof. Okay, moving on. Documentation. I know this part feels daunting to people. Just mountains of paperwork. Can you break it down? What are the absolute essentials, and maybe where do people often slip up?
Absolutely. It looks like a lot, but it's manageable if you tackle it systematically. I won't list every single piece of paper, but let's hit the main categories and the tricky spots.
Okay.
Personal documents. This is standard stuff, valid passport, photos, the application form itself. But the one that often catches people is the criminal record certificate. It usually needs to be issued really recently, like within the last 90 days, so timing is critical.
Good tip. 90 days.
Yeah, and don't forget, you also need to sign a form allowing Portugal to check your record there too.
Right. What about the work and money proof?
Okay, professional and financial docs. This is often the biggest hurdle. Proving your remote work status. Your employment contract or your service agreements, if you're freelance, they need to clearly state you work remotely.
Explicitly remote.
Explicitly, and ideally, show where your employer or clients are based outside Portugal. Then, bank statements. Usually the last 3 to 6 months, consistently showing that income hitting your account, that €3,480 per month minimum.
Consistency is key.
Very key. You'll also need proof of accommodation in Portugal, like a rental agreement, and health insurance that's valid there.
Okay.
For family members, you need things like marriage certificates, birth certificates, and they generally need to be apostilled.
Ah, the apostille. I've heard that can be a process.
It absolutely can, and that brings me to a critical point covering everything.
But
Pretty much every single non-Portuguese document needs 2 things. First, an official translation by a certified translator. Second, it needs to be apostilled or legalized, depending on your country.
translation and apostille.
Yes. And people often underestimate the time and the cost involved in getting all that done correctly. That's a major potential pitfall.
That's a really crucial warning. Okay, so let's say you've wrestled the document beast and you think you have everything. What's the actual application journey, step by step, from prep to getting that residence card?
All right, let's map it out. Think of it in phases. Phase 1 is preliminary prep, stuff you do before you even submit the visa application.
Okay, what's involved there?
You absolutely must get a Portuguese NIF number. That's your tax ID. Think of it like your social security number for Portugal.
Right, the NIF. How do you get that from outside Portugal?
As a non-resident, you typically need a fiscal representative in Portugal to help you apply. But nowadays, there are many services that help you do this remotely. It's essential for almost any transaction, opening a bank account, signing a lease.
So get the NIF first.
Yeah.
What else?
While not strictly required for the visa application itself, opening a Portuguese bank account early on can really simplify things later, especially for showing proof of funds and managing expenses once you arrive. Some banks, like Activo Bank, are known to be quite expat-friendly.
Good practical tip.
Then, securing accommodation. As we said, you need proof. A rental agreement is ideal. We strongly recommend aiming for at least a 12-month lease to show commitment, though some manage with shorter initial proof.
Okay, and insurance.
Yep, arranging health insurance. It has to be valid in Portugal and cover things like medical emergencies, hospitalization, repatriation. That's non-negotiable.
Got it. So NIF, bank account ideally, accommodation proof, health insurance, prep, done. What's next?
Step 2, gather all your documents. Everything we talked about, meticulously checked, translated, apostilled.
The big pile.
The big organized pile. Step 3, submit the visa application. This usually means booking an appointment at the Portuguese consulate or embassy in your country of residence. You go in, hand over the documents, pay the application fee, which is around €90. You might have a short interview.
Okay, submit and wait.
Exactly. Step 4, receive your entry visa. If all goes well, you'll get the visa stamped in your passport. Remember, this is the temporary one, usually valid for 4 months, that allows you to enter Portugal specifically to apply for residency. Processing time here is typically 30 to 60 days.
30 to 60 days, okay.
Step 5, travel to Portugal. You have to enter within that 4-month validity period of your entry visa. Don't wait until the last minute.
Right, get there. And then?
And then the final, crucial step, step 6, apply for your residence permit. Once you're in Portugal, you need to get an appointment with AIMA. That's the Agency for Integration, Migration, and Asylum. It replaced the old CEF.
AIMA, right.
You'll go to your appointment, maybe submit some updated documents, provide your biometric data, fingerprints, photo, and you pay the residence permit fee, which is roughly €170. Once that's approved, you'll eventually get your first residence card, usually valid for 2 years.
2 years for the first card. Okay, that's a really clear roadmap. Thanks. Now, the practicals again. Time and money for this whole process.
Yeah.
What's a realistic timeline expectation and what kind of costs are we looking at, roughly?
Good questions, always important. Okay, timeline, document prep, getting everything translated, apostilled, gathered. That can easily take 4 to 8 weeks. Be patient with this part.
4 to 8 weeks just for docs.
Okay, then the visa application processing at the consulate, usually 30 to 60 days, as we said.
Right.
Then you have that 4-month window from the entry visa to travel and get settled enough to apply for residency. And finally, the residence permit processing inside Portugal by AIMA. This can vary quite a bit, realistically anywhere from 3 weeks to maybe even 12 weeks, depending on backlog.
3 to 12 weeks for the final card.
Yeah. So total estimated time from starting your application to actually holding that first residence card, you're probably looking at somewhere between 4 to 6 months. It's definitely not an overnight thing.
4 to 6 months. Good to manage expectations.
Uh-huh.
And costs. Ballpark.
Approximate costs per person, just for the process itself. Visa application fee, around €90.
Okay.
Residence permit application and issuance fees combined, about 326 total. That's roughly €170 for the application, 156 for the card itself.
Got it. 326 for the permit side.
Document translation and apostilles. This varies hugely depending on how many docs you have and where you get it done. Budget, maybe 200 to 500 chicken.
Okay.
If you use a service for your NIF representation, maybe 100 to €200.
Right.
Health insurance. This is ongoing, but for the initial required proof, let's estimate the annual cost, maybe 500 to €1,200 a year, depending on coverage and provider.
Okay, annual cost.
And don't forget your accommodation deposit when you sign a lease, usually 1 or 2 months rent up front.
Right, that's separate but necessary.
So adding up just the core process fees, translations, NEF help, you're looking at an estimated initial outlay of maybe $1,300 to $2,500 per person. And that's excluding your rent, your deposit, your living expenses, just the admin and setup costs.
1,300 to 2,500 euros plus living costs. Good
Yeah.
to know. Okay, so that covers getting set up. But for people really making a life change, what about the long term? How do you keep the residency? And what's the path towards, say, permanent residency or even citizenship?
Great questions. So you get that first 2-year residence permit. To maintain and renew your D8 residency status, you essentially have to keep proving you meet the conditions.
Keep meeting the requirements.
Exactly. Continue to meet the income requirement, that $3,480 a month. Critically, demonstrate you're actually spending significant time in Portugal. The general rule of thumb, and often the threshold for tax residency too, is spending at least 183 days per year in the country.
The 183-day rule.
Okay. Maintain your remote work arrangement with income from outside Portugal. Keep your health insurance valid. And comply with your Portuguese tax obligation.
Right. Pay your taxes.
The renewal process involves another appointment with Emila, submitting updated documents to prove all this, and paying a renewal fee. After that first 2-year permit, the subsequent renewals are typically for 3 years at a time.
2 years, then 3 years, then 3 years.
Okay.
And permanent residency.
Permanent residency becomes an option after you've held temporary residency legally and continuously for 5 years.
5 years total.
Yep. For that, you'll need to show you still have stable income, accommodation, a clean criminal record, and this is important, a basic knowledge of the Portuguese language, usually assessed at the A2 level.
A2 Portuguese, so start learning early.
Definitely advisable. Now, Portuguese citizenship. Interestingly, the timeline is also 5 years of legal residency.
Same 5 years.
Yes, the requirements are pretty similar to permanent residency. Continuous legal residence, clean record, A2 level Portuguese. Plus, they add a requirement to demonstrate effective links to the national community.
Effective links. What does that mean in practice?
It's a bit subjective, but generally means things like participating in local life, perhaps belonging to associations, having social connections, showing you're integrated. But here's a really fascinating update, a real game changer you mentioned earlier.
A timeline thing.
Exactly. Until recently, the 5-year clock for citizenship started when your first residence permit was granted. Now, due to processing delays, the law changed. The 5 years are counted from the moment you submit your application for the residence permit.
Wow. So the waiting time during processing now counts towards your 5 years.
Precisely. This can effectively shave off months, sometimes even close to a year, off the total time required before you can apply for citizenship. It's a huge acknowledgement of the process delays and a big benefit for applicants.
That really is a massive bonus for anyone thinking long term.
Yeah.
Incredible. Okay, beyond the visa itself, tax is always a huge consideration. What should someone moving on a D8 know about Portuguese tax residency and that NHR thing you mentioned?
Absolutely critical topic. So first, becoming a tax resident. Generally, you become one if you spend more than 183 days in Portugal in a calendar year.
The 183-day rule again.
Yep, it's key for both residency and tax. Or if you have a permanent home there that suggests it's your main habitual residence, even if you spend slightly less time.
Okay. And once you are a tax resident,
Then the potential good news kicks in. The Non-Habitual Resident, NHR, tax program. If you qualify, this offers some pretty sweet tax deals for up to 10 years.
10 years is a long time. What are the main benefits?
2 key potential benefits. First, for income you earn from Portuguese sources that falls under certain listed high-value activities. Think certain tech roles, artists, doctors, architects, etc. You could pay a flat income tax rate of just 20%.
20% flat rate. That's attractive compared to standard rates.
It can be, yes.
Right.
But the really big one for many digital nomads is the second potential benefit, how foreign source income is treated.
Okay, income from outside Portugal.
Right. Under NHR, your foreign source income, like salary from a foreign employer, dividends from foreign companies, freelance income from foreign clients, might be exempt from Portuguese income tax altogether.
Exempt. Wow. What's the catch?
The main condition is usually that the income can be taxed in the source country according to the rules of the double taxation treaty between Portugal and that country. It doesn't always mean it has to be taxed there, just that the treaty gives the source country the right to tax it.
Okay. Depends on tax treaties.
Exactly. And you have to apply for NHR status. You need to prove you haven't been a Portuguese tax resident in the previous 5 years. And you must register for NHR with the tax authorities by March 31st of the year after you become a tax resident.
Deadline is important, March 31st.
Crucial deadline. Look, NHR is complex. The rules on high-value activities, the specifics of tax treaties. It's definitely an area where getting professional advice from a tax expert familiar with Portuguese and expat tax is highly, highly recommended.
Absolutely. Don't DIY your international taxes.
Please don't. Oh, and one more thing on money. Social Security. As a remote worker, especially self-employed, you'll likely need to contribute to Portuguese Social Security. It's around 21.4% for freelancers, though there are some initial exemptions. Another thing to factor in.
Right. Social Security, too.
Yeah.
Good point. Okay, this is super helpful. For those listening who are feeling inspired and maybe ready to start planning, what are some practical tips? How can you make your application as strong as possible? And maybe just as importantly, what common mistakes should you absolutely avoid?
Okay, strengthening your application. Number 1, income proof. Don't just show the bare minimum for 3 months. If you can, show 6 months, 12 months of consistent income above the threshold. More history equals more stability in their eyes.
Go beyond the minimum proof.
Definitely. And I'll say it again. Make sure your employment contract or service agreements explicitly state you work remotely and that your employer or clients are outside Portugal. Ambiguity here is not your friend.
Crystal clear remote work clause.
Yes. And organize your documents professionally. Clear labels, logical order, make it easy for the consular officer to see you've met all the requirements. Think of it like presenting a solid case.
Right. What about accommodation proof? Any tips there?
Well, a 12-month lease is the gold standard for showing commitment. But realistically, getting that from abroad can be tough.
Yeah, finding a place remotely.
Exactly. So some people successfully use a confirmed Airbnb or hotel booking for, say, the first 4 or 6 months to secure the visa with the clear intention of finding a long-term lease once they arrive. Just make sure whatever you use is verifiable and covers that initial visa period. Also, do some research on neighborhoods. Look for places with good internet, maybe existing nomad communities. It helps the transition.
Good advice. And banking.
Set up efficient ways to transfer money internationally early on. Services like Wise, Revolut can be useful. And again, talk to that tax advisor. Understand NHR. Understand your obligations before you move.
Okay, so prepare financially. Now the pitfalls. What are the big mistakes to avoid?
Number 1, insufficient income documentation. Not showing enough months, income being inconsistent, or not clearly proving it's from remote work outside Portugal. That's probably the top reason for rejection.
Get the income proof perfect.
Perfect, or as close as possible. Second, inadequate health insurance. Buying a cheap policy that doesn't actually meet the Schengen requirements for coverage amount or repatriation. Double-check the policy details.
Right. Read the fine print.
Third, poor planning for residency obligations. People get excited about moving but forget about that 183-day minimum stay requirement to maintain residency, or they neglect the tax implications. Plan to actually live there.
It's not just a long holiday.
Exactly. And finally, underestimating the Portuguese language requirement, especially for permanent residency and citizenship down the line. Don't wait until year 4 to start learning A2 Portuguese. Even basic phrases help with integration from day 1.
Start learning early. All really solid, actionable advice. Now let's put the D8 in context a bit. People might hear about other Portuguese visas, like the D7 or the Golden Visa. How does the D8 compare? Why choose D8 over those?
That's a fundamental comparison to make. Portugal's been smart, creating different visas for different profiles. The D8 fits a very specific niche. Take the D7 visa, for instance. That's designed for people with passive income.
Passive income, like pensions or rent.
Exactly. Retirement funds, rental income, dividends, royalties. The D7 generally has lower income requirements than the D8, but the key is it's not for active work income earned while you're in Portugal, even if remote. The D8 is specifically for that active remote work income.
Okay, D7 passive, D8 active remote work. Got it. What about the D2?
The D2 entrepreneur visa is for people who want to start or invest in a business in Portugal. So you're creating a Portuguese company, maybe hiring locally, contributing directly to the Portuguese economy that way.
Setting up shop in Portugal?
Right. The D8 is different because it lets you keep your existing remote job or your business operating entirely outside Portugal. There's no requirement to set up a local business entity with the D8.
Less complex in that sense. And the Golden Visa.
Ah, the famous Golden Visa. That's a residency by investment program. It used to involve real estate, but now it's more focused on things like investment funds or donations to cultural heritage, starting around $250,000, sometimes more.
Big investment required.
Significant investment. But the main draw of the Golden Visa is the very minimal physical presence requirement, sometimes as little as 7 days per year in Portugal.
Just 7 days.
Yeah, so it's popular for investors who want EU residency rights, but don't necessarily plan to live in Portugal full-time. The D8 is the opposite in that sense. No huge investment needed, but you do need to spend substantial time in Portugal, that 183 plus days, to maintain residency.
Okay, so D8 is really for the hands-on remote worker who wants to live in Portugal, not just invest there.
Precisely. It's tailored for you, the location-independent professional making Portugal your home base.
This has been incredibly detailed on the visa mechanics. Let's zoom out as we wrap up. Bringing it all together, what's Portugal actually like for digital nomads in 2025? What's the infrastructure, the lifestyle, the real experience on the ground?
Well, the really good news is Portugal seems committed to making things even better for nomads. Looking at 2025 specifically, AIMA, the immigration agency, is genuinely trying to improve things. We're hearing about better online platforms, more processing centers, more staff, even extended validity for some documents, all aimed at tackling those processing delays.
Okay, so hopefully smoother processing, that's good.
Fingers crossed. And in terms of remote work infrastructure, Portugal was already good, and it's still improving. Fiber internet is becoming ubiquitous, seriously fast speeds. 100 Mbps up to 1 Gbps is common now. 5G coverage is expanding too.
Fast internet is crucial.
Absolutely. Co-working spaces are everywhere, not just Lisbon and Porto, but smaller towns too. And initiatives like the digital nomad villages, especially the famous one in Ponta do Sol, Madeira, are thriving, building real communities.
Yeah, I've heard about the Madeira village. Sounds amazing.
It really is. Plus, for tech folks, the networking scene in Lisbon and Porto keeps growing. Lots of events, meetups.
Sounds like a solid setup. But where are people actually choosing to live and work? And what's the real cost of living comfortably there now in 2025?
Well, the top destinations are still popular for a reason. Lisbon remains huge for its vibrancy, connections, startup scene. Porto offers a great vibe, maybe slightly lower costs, and a growing tech hub.
Lisbon and Porto, the big two.
Yeah. But then you have Madeira, especially Ponta do Sol, which is almost legendary in the nomad community now. The Algarve coast is always popular. Think Lagos, Faro for the beaches and lifestyle. And places like Ericeira or Peniche attract the surf crowd, but also have strong nomad communities.
Lots of options beyond the main cities.
Definitely. As for cost of living in 2025, you need to be realistic. It's still affordable compared to many parts of Western Europe or North America, but costs have risen.
Inflation everywhere, I guess.
Pretty much. So a decent one-bedroom apartment, maybe 700 to 1,200 euros a month, but could be more in prime spots in Lisbon or Porto.
700 to 1,200 for rent. Okay.
A co-working space membership, maybe 100 to 200 euros a month. Eating out, a mid-range lunch might be 10 euro, 15. Public transport is pretty cheap, like 40 euros a month for a pass in Lisbon. Private health insurance, maybe 50, 100 euro a month.
So what's a total monthly budget look like?
For a single person living comfortably, not extravagantly, you should probably budget somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500 euro per month, depending heavily on your location choice and lifestyle.
1,500 to 2,500 euros. Gives people a target.
Yeah, it's a reasonable range for comfortable living as a digital nomad in Portugal right now.
Okay, so let's try and recap this deep dive. What we've really uncovered is that the Portugal D8 Digital Nomad Visa is it's a genuinely clear, legally sound way for remote workers to make Portugal home.
Absolutely. Purpose-built for them.
Right. It really addresses that ambiguity that maybe existed before with other visas for location-independent professionals. Now, it does have those relatively high income requirements we talked about.
Targets established professionals.
Exactly. But the payoff seems significant. Legal certainty, access to Portugal's really good healthcare system, those potential NHR tax benefits, and, crucially, that clear path to permanent residency and even EU citizenship.
Big advantages.
Yeah, it makes it incredibly attractive for people looking for a longer-term base in Europe. So while you definitely need thorough preparation, meticulous documents.
Yeah, skip that part.
No shortcuts.
Yeah.
But the D8's clear rules and hopefully those improving processing times make it seem like an outstanding choice for remote workers eyeing Portugal in 2025.
I agree. And if we just, connect this to the bigger picture for a second, the rise of visas like Portugal's D8, it's not just about making remote work easier logistically. It says something really interesting about the future, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, think about it. We're seeing more ways to establish residency based on where you work from, not necessarily where your company is physically based. What does that tell us about the future of work itself? And maybe more profoundly, how might it reshape our ideas about what belonging even means in a world where your professional life feels increasingly borderless?
That's a deep thought.
It leads to a really interesting question for everyone listening, I think.
Right.
In a world where your office can literally be anywhere, how do you define home?